Hey guys, this is Delphine with a Japanese lesson on the CultureQuirk channel. So it's been a little while since we talked about kanji. If you missed it, here's a link to a video where I talk about the first step that I took in order to learn kanji, which is learning what they look like. Today I'll be talking about what kanji sound like, how you read them and pronounce them. This lesson was requested by Blonde X Naruto, who wanted to know more about these two terms, onyomi and kunyomi. Now I'll be going over those in a second, but let's start out with the very basics of kanji pronunciation. Whenever we looked at hiragana and katakana, those symbols were based off of their pronunciation. This is hiragana and katakana a. These don't mean anything by themselves, they're simply a sound. But kanji works very differently. These symbols convey the meaning of a word, and they usually have a couple of different pronunciations. So while this symbol will always mean a person or people, you could pronounce it hito, bito, jin, nin, all depending on context. This can get extremely confusing. The reason that there are multiple pronunciations in the first place is that kanji is based off of Chinese symbols. Now all those years ago when the Japanese imported the Chinese writing system, well, they already had a spoken language of their own. So when these symbols came in, they already had the traditional Chinese pronunciation, and then the Japanese sort of force their own pronunciation of words onto the symbols as well. So even today, most kanji at least have two pronunciations. One is their original Chinese pronunciation called the onyomi, and the other is the Japanese pronunciation of the word, the kunyomi. Best way to learn is through examples, so let's use this kanji for person to go over the two different types of pronunciation. So first, let's go over the onyomi, which again is the Chinese pronunciation. Now sometimes kanji have just one of these, which fits with how the character is pronounced in Chinese. But even though there's only that one pronunciation in Chinese, Japanese kanji sometimes have more than one onyomi. The reason behind this is that moving an entire writing system from China to Japan didn't happen in just one fell swoop. So sometimes the same character was introduced multiple times in Japan, and the Japanese generally kept the different pronunciations that they heard. It's also worth mentioning that the sounds didn't always quite mold themselves very well to the Japanese language, which means that the onyomi might actually sound very different from the original Chinese pronunciation. For example, with the character for person. Now I'm not an expert here, but from what I can tell, the Chinese pronunciation sounds a little bit more like ren. But in Japanese, the onyomi include jin and nin. So the switch from Chinese to Japanese wasn't quite perfect, but just in general, the onyomi do sound a little more Chinese-y than the kunyomi do. Now, when do you use these onyomi? How do you know when to pronounce it the Chinese way? Now, of course, these rules do have exceptions, but a good guideline is this. The onyomi is used a lot for compound words. So if you see 2 or 3 symbols making up one word, you'll probably need to use the onyomi for those symbols. So like here, this word means a Japanese person, and it is pronounced nihon jin. So all 3 of these symbols are pronounced using their onyomi. So remember, compound words, you'll probably use onyomi. Now let's move on to kunyomi. These were the original Japanese words that already existed in the spoken language, and then they tried to fit these to the new written language. So again, sometimes there's just one kunyomi that fits with the word, and other times there's more than one. So for example, the kunyomi for person include hito and bito. Now if onyomi are usually used for compounds, kunyomi are usually used when a word is just sitting by itself. So you can say hito desu, and that would mean this is a person. Hito is the word for person all on its own. Now I want to show you another way of how to tell if you should pronounce something with kunyomi, but for that I'll use a different symbol. This is a symbol for the adjective big or large. Now one of its onyomi is dai, and you can see this in the word daigaku. This literally means big school, and it's the word for college. The kunyomi for this symbol is o, but this symbol can't just sit by itself this time. The Japanese word for big is oki. The kanji takes care of the o, and then you just stick the hiragana at the end for the ki. Now I think the reason why this happens is, well, first of all, the word oki is a little bit too long to fit with just one kanji, so they needed the hiragana to finish the word. And also, you might learn this later, but the hiragana are also necessary when it comes to conjugation. So if I wanted to say not big, you say okikunai, and you just change the hiragana there. This works for adjectives and also works for verbs. Here's the kanji for the word to eat, and this word is pronounced tabemasu, but if you switch up the hiragana, then you can conjugate the verb. Tabemashita would make it past tense. Tabemasen would make it negative tense, and so on. Don't worry about all that conjugation stuff yet, that is for another lesson, but this is another great indicator of when to use kunyomi, when there's hiragana at the end of a word. So compounds, onyomi. If it's sitting alone or has hiragana at the end, kunyomi. Now, I don't want to freak you out, but I did want to show you that there are exceptions to this rule. So let's use our kanji for big for this example. Here's a word meaning big rain, if the weather is bad and it's raining cats and dogs. So at first you would think it's a compound word, right? I need to use the onyomi for this, and the first character is probably pronounced dai, like in daigaku. But unfortunately, in this situation, you don't do that. For both of these symbols, you actually use the kunyomi, so this word is pronounced oame. I can't really give you a reason as to why this is, just be aware that it does happen, there are exceptions to the rules, and it's something to watch out for. Now you're hopefully starting to get a general idea of when to use onyomi and when to use kunyomi, despite the exceptions. But I know that I've mentioned that there are oftentimes more than one onyomi and kunyomi for each word. How do you know which ones to use? Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that either. There aren't many rules when it comes to this, and it's just something that you're gonna have to pick up over time. It does add another layer to the confusion of pronouncing kanji, and I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty tough at first to try and understand all of this and memorize so many little bits of information. But don't forget that any language is going to require you to remember a lot of new information. And although the Japanese writing system seems so different from other languages and may be overwhelming at first, once you get a general idea of how the writing system works, the rest is just learning new words and seeing little patterns here and there, just like any other language. So don't get too intimidated, you can do it. I'm no master at the writing system, but now that I spent a little bit of time with it, I find it so interesting and beautiful now, and being able to read something just makes me so excited. Just take your time to wrap your mind around the pronunciation concepts that I've talked about today, and I'm sure you'll be just fine. I hope this video helped you guys out, and Blonde X Naruto, thank you for your question. As usual, leave any questions or lesson requests in the comment section below. Good luck with everything, and happy learning!